What's going on, everyone? Welcome back to the channel. Today, another special double I swipe. If you don't know what a double I swipe is by now, you need to go back like a month and watch those videos, man. How are you guys gonna just come onto this video and act like you know me? You know what I mean? I've pretty much covered every single iPhone. The one thing I like doing is starting off with the newest ones and kind of working ourselves backwards. But at a certain point, I'm like, how far do we go before it's a double I swipe? Like, is the iPhone 4 a double I swipe thing, or is it like a nostalgic look, like a 15 or 13 years later, like I'm doing with the Sony PSP and the original Nintendo DS? So I'm going to do this as a double I swipe. I think next year we're going to do just like a nostalgic look back at it. But I'm really more curious about the people who still own the iPhone 4 as a daily driver, as a main phone. And I really don't think there's a lot of people out there. If you're one of those people, okay, now listen closely. If you're one of those people, I want you to DM me on Instagram or Twitter, or even just leave some of your experience with the iPhone 4 and still using it in the comment section below. I want to see what you guys have to say, okay? Because my experience, I don't use this as a main phone anymore, obviously, but you do. So I want to hear your experience, and other people can read them and make an opinion about it too. So I feel like that'd be pretty funny and cool to look at. But man, the iPhone 4 came out in 2010. It came out in June, which was super weird because we're so used to seeing the iPhones come out in like September or October, whenever like the September event happens. But this one was released in WWDC in June, so pretty cool. I actually kind of like that release more than the September one, but I realized they drop it in September not only because of more sales in the fiscal year, but also they can market it during the holidays and things like that. So this was, in my opinion, one of the most important iPhones. I honestly think it's probably the most important iPhone that was ever released after the first iPhone. So this thing really changed the whole outlook and design of the whole entire iPhone lineup. So it went from like that whole kind of older looking design with the iPhone 3GS to the glass on the back, retina screen looking, power button on top, which it always had it, and just an overall premium feeling device. And even if like the power and the performance, whatever, didn't improve that much from the 3GS, which I think it honestly did, I think this was just the more so upgrade that we needed to improve just the way this phone felt in the hand. And this was a very much needed phone and a very much needed design change. Looking at the front, we still had the same size screen. It was 3.5 inches, but they actually switched it to a retina screen at this time. So the resolution was 640 by 960, and it had 330 pixels per inch, man. And I'll tell you right now, this screen still has a little bit of, oomph to it. It's not a horrible screen. I mean, definitely there's better screens out there right now. This is not an OLED screen or anything like that, but I'm not going to take away what this phone brought to the whole entire iPhone lineup and disrespect it like that. I think the screen is beautiful as it is. I wish it could have been better, but it is what it is, I'm totally joking. And obviously, like I said, this thing had glass on the back end. I think this was just the most important thing about this phone. The fact that Apple brought it here, then they eventually kind of had it on the iPhone 5, but then totally removed it on the 6, but then they added it back in. And I feel like there hasn't really been a phone that feels as good in the hand as the iPhone 4. I mean, obviously the iPhone 10 feels more premium, this and that. It is more premium, and the 10s and 10 or whatever. But this phone, it just feels so heavy in the hands, and it feels like you still have a premium device, even though you can still pick these things up right now for like $15. The fact that this thing was Apple's flagship phone makes total sense to me. Whereas if I look at the iPhone 3GS, I'm like, man, this phone is extremely, extremely old. How did they sell this and market this as a crazy phone? But at the time it was, because the phones haven't matured that much at that point, but now they have, if that makes any sense. I just confused myself. Now moving on to the software, this is kind of interesting. This thing was released with iOS 4, but you can upgrade it to iOS 7.1.2, and I feel like it's really weird why it ended at 7.1.2. I feel like they could have extended it a little bit longer, but here's the interesting thing. The phone right after this, the iPhone 4S, got an extra year of support, so that thing ended on iOS 9.3.5. So there's quite a bit of difference in terms of software between this and its predecessor, but I already made a double I swipe on the iPhone 4S. You guys can go back a couple videos and watch that one. But the iPhone 4 got a couple versions of iOS, only like 3, and this is usually less than what most iPhones usually got at the time, but Apple eventually extended it to the iPhone 4S. And I guess they kind of went from there. But I'll definitely say, in terms of the software, it could have been better, but I think Apple was still kind of going through a learning lesson at this time, so I can't really hate on it too much. And so that kind of covers the software aspect of it. I kind of want to talk about the performance, as I usually do. Man, this thing had the Apple A4 chip, a 1 gigahertz CPU, and half a gig of RAM, so 512 megabytes of RAM. And surprisingly, I'll tell you right now, on iOS 7.1.2, it's not horribly slow, okay? It's not horribly slow. You can still kind of maneuver through things. I mean, would I use this as a main phone? Probably not. I mean, would I even use it as a side phone? Obviously not. But I think this is more so to do than just the way this phone performs. I mean, I'll tell you right now, I think iOS 7 is a pretty decent software still. I think we've gotten a lot more features since then. I think a lot of things have changed, but I think the overall UI is still very similar. And that's why I'm kind of waiting for iOS 13 to come out, because Apple's supposed to bring a lot of new changes and a lot of cool things with that. But with iOS 7, it was a complete redesign from iOS 6, and that was a humongous jump, and nobody can really take that away. And I think for a lot of people, and I remember hearing about this a lot when iOS 7 came out, that there were a lot of problems with it on specific phones. A lot of people had the iPhone 4s, and they were stating that iOS 7 was really messing up their device. And I think by the time 7.1.2 came out, I think they kind of cleaned out a lot of it. On my iPhone 4 specifically, I don't really have too many problems with it. Apps open fine, I'm multitasking okay. I mean, of course it's slow and it's really choppy, and it takes a long time to do things, but I can see the effort, okay? And I think that's probably the best way I can sum it up, man. I see the effort, and I was able to get a couple games on here. I think I was able to get Temple Run, and dude, I don't know how Temple Run does it, dude, but they are able to make any game run on any device. And I've seen games that have like less graphical power than this, like this game Temple Run. It's really not that low in graphics if you think about it. I mean, it's a pretty simple game, but it's not like horribly it's not like a stick figure or anything. And the iPhone 4 is able to run it okay, I guess. But there's a lot of apps that are not supported with iOS 7. So Snapchat, you need like iOS 9.3.5, Instagram, Twitter, I think too. So there's really not too many apps that are supported on this thing anymore. So really, you're only stuck on the main Apple apps like the iMessages and calculator app and things like that. Temple Run, I was able to get on it though. So in terms of the overall performance, I'll tell you right now, obviously, if you can get some apps on it, it'll take a long time to be able to go through things. But I think at the time, especially during iOS 7 era, it was respectable, and I never really owned an iPhone during the iOS 7 era. So if you want to, the same people who own the iPhone 4s, leave some kind of more input on the iOS 7 era and let me know how it's holding up right now, being used as your main phone. I'd really love to hear that. Now that kind of covers up the performance and kind of the usability of the phone, but I kind of want to hit on the camera too. Now this is surprising. It had a 5 megapixel sensor on the back, and you were able to shoot 720p videos on it. And the reason that's surprising is not more so of the back camera, but more so of the front camera. Okay, this thing had a VGA quality camera on it, and this is pretty crazy because this was the first time we saw a front camera on an iPhone. We had the iPhone 3GS that only had a back camera, and the same thing with the 2 iPhones before that one, and Apple really knocked it out of the ballpark here. Now, it wasn't the best forward-facing camera, it wasn't a really good back-facing camera either. At the time, I'm sure it was, but what this brought and what it signified was the revolution of phone manufacturers starting to implement a front-facing camera for every single one of their devices. Apple, in a way, is kind of like a standard. Like I said, they weren't the first phone to bring a front-facing camera, but they really did broadcast it to a larger audience, and then more manufacturers started doing it. Removal of the headphone jack, eventually companies started doing that. The same thing with the bezel-less trend and the notch, eventually companies started doing that. So in a lot of ways, you can hate Apple for the headphone jack and the notch thing, but you gotta love them for the front-facing camera. And I guess the cameras on this thing, they can still take photos. They're pretty grainy and they're really messed up in a lot of ways, but I still have so much respect for them, and I don't want to take away what this phone specifically brought. So that's the best way I can hit on the camera very, very quickly. Now let's talk about the battery life. Now this is pretty surprising for me, and it's probably going to be surprising for a lot of you as well. The iPhone 4 had a 1420 milliamp hour battery. Now this thing is about 9 years old right now, so it's probably not 1400 milliamp hours anymore. The size probably went down a lot. It's probably like 900 or like 600. The battery life isn't amazing right now, but I'm sure if you put a brand new battery on it, the battery life probably wouldn't be that horrible. Now that really depends on iOS 7. I've heard a lot of conflicting reports on that saying the battery life was horrible on it, but at this time, I don't know what to say, but whether it's the battery life or the battery size or the software, but it's really not that good right now. But I'm sure at the time, and especially on iOS 6, it wasn't horrible. But the interesting thing I want to hit on is that this thing, like I said, 1400 milliamp hours, the iPhone 8 had like a 1600 milliamp hour battery. So how has our phones gotten so much faster, so much better camera, so much this, so much that, but the batteries have only marginally gotten better, and the battery sizes and battery life, like everything overall, it just hasn't gotten that much better. What do we need to say to these people to make them, to improve our battery sizes, to improve the battery life, everything like that? It just annoys me like crazy, and I don't think specs matter all that much. I have to state them in the video or else you guys are going to be confused what I'm talking about. But the battery size is one of those specs that I think is the most important, crucial thing to talk about, because I know you can implement certain software things to make the battery life better, but I would rather have that and a bigger battery size than just one or the other, honestly. Now, some other notable things to note. This thing, is a beast when it came out. I think, just the way this phone looked, I can't emphasize that enough. I'm choking up thinking about it. It only got a couple versions of software of iOS, which was surprising because all the newer iPhones eventually got more support. So kind of a sad thing for this phone. It had a very short life, but you know what? Even though it had a very short life for any iPhone or anything like that, I think overall what this phone brought was more so than just another iPhone release or more money to Apple or anything like that. I think the legacy of the iPhone 4 is probably the best legacy of any iPhone, and it's sad that it was short-lived, I'm not gonna lie, but the fact that this thing brought the glass back, the front-facing camera, all these other different things, the most premium iPhone at the time and one of the most premium iPhones ever built in my opinion, this thing was a beast, and to say anything other than this thing is a living legend still would be blasphemy. So I'll definitely say 100%. I would probably not recommend anyone using an iPhone 4 in 2019. I would at least, the lowest I would recommend somebody going right now, if you have the money, get an iPhone 6s. That's the lowest I would recommend anybody. But I wouldn't hesitate recommending this to people who just kind of want to see something of Apple's past, having something in their collection. I mean, that's pretty much where we're going at now. And this is probably the last double I swipe I will make of it. Eventually next year, I'll do like a nostalgic look back. But this thing, nonetheless, has my respect and it has a thumbs up for me, man, honestly. And that is pretty much the iPhone 4 in 2019. What's really changed about it? Obviously, nothing's going to change because it's not getting software, but a lot of the environment and surroundings have changed. And I think I did my best to kind of explain that to the best of my ability. But let me know what you guys think. Of course, if you own the iPhone 4, let me know your experience in the description comment section below. And other people, if you're interested in that, read those comments, like them or whatever. But hit the like button on this video first. That'll mean so much. But definitely hit that subscribe button. Every single subscriber that we get really does count, and it really does motivate me to make more videos like this. So that'll mean so much if you guys could hit that. Also check out the other links down in the description. My Twitter, my Instagram, my second channel, all those links are linked down below. I'd really appreciate if you guys could check it out. But more importantly than everything else, I love every single one of you guys. Hopefully I'll catch you guys in the next video. Peace out till then.